Get ready for the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in. After a spring break hiatus, we are back for the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down District 4 activities most weeks in, most weeks out here in the state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney. We are joined today by Guido and Speech Boy, Scott Burton. What's up, Scott?
Hey, what's going on there, Brandon? Seems like it's been a while since we've been together. We took a couple weeks off.
Yes, we took a week off in between the kind of the winter sports to spring sports transition, and then I didn't even realize this, but the following week was spring break for just about everybody. So nobody was around to talk. So
no, including myself. We would have been shooting in Vegas over spring break. So that's where Guido comes in. So I went down to Vegas over spring break and caught some March Madness down there, and was right there for that UCLA Gonzaga thrilling game. Amazing. And, stayed down there for about 4 or 5 nights and just tore up Vegas, or Vegas tore me up, whatever. I mean, it's, tomato, whatever. But I kept their lights on. I kept the MGM Grand lights on for them by playing at the 21 table, and that was fun. And so there's Guido, But then I come right back, and I'm Speech Boy now because I have taken over coaching our speech team. The one about, the one I keep telling you about, and our competition for district is Saturday. And our shirts are in. And so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What? So here's a question. So if you're watching this video on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, you saw the shirt that Scott just held up. If you're listening to this audio only at IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcast, it's kind of a black t-shirt with kind of teal blue logo lettering. It says Timberwolves, though. Let me ask you about that, because you Jerome Tigers for everything else. Why is it the Timberwolves for the speech team?
Well, it's really a funny story too, because back when I took over coaching the speech program at Jerome in 1998, I saw you shudder there for a minute, Brandon. That was a long time ago.
What? No. Okay. You want to know why I'm shuddering? Okay. As we are quick aside, and then you can tell your story. As we are recording this, it is Thursday, March 30th, opening day for Major League Baseball. And everyone knows Scott and I are diehard baseball fans. I'm wearing my Boston Red Sox shirt. The Red Sox are playing right now, Scott. They gave up a solo home run in the top of the first, but they've already gotten the run back in the bottom of the first. So it's already 1-1, and the roller coaster ride begins.
You are going to be a half participant during this broadcast.
Pretty much, yes. You're going to see me glance over to my other screen numerous times here. So
I can say whatever I want and just kind of bag on you, throw you under the bus, and you're just going to nod and smile. Basically, that's what's going to happen, right?
And that's how it is most shows anyways. But yes, especially true today.
So anyway, back to that story about the Timberwolves. When I took over in 98, I was getting my feet wet, trying to figure out kind of how I wanted to run the program. And something started to emerge right around 2002, I think it was, 2001. Anyway, a group of boys that were on the speech team, they were football players and student body officers and whatever, they were the leaders of the school, made a fake gang, right? And just to mock real gangs, because they thought they were dumb. They are dumb. And so to mock it, they set up a fake gang, and they called themselves the Timberwolves. And they came up with a color. And since all stupid gangs gravitate to a color, they came up with teal, and little slogans called Men of Teal, and get rich or get rich, and a handshake, and the whole 9 yards. And all of a sudden it just caught fire, right? And so it became the speech team, the Timberwolves. But you have to be, I don't want to say initiated into it or jumped into it, nothing like that. Okay, but you have to go through a rite of passage that developed as well. And then once you kind of go through that, then all of a sudden you get your teal bandana, you get the secret handshake, you get all that. And this is completely out of my control. I don't do any of this. So once it took off in the mid 2000s, these kids, man, they just jumped all over it. And it became kind of a really strong, close group of kids. And that is, and it's always stayed, and little things have always popped up. They've written bylaws, they've written this and that and everything else. And it has been a very, very cool thing. And so when COVID hit and I got out of the speech gig and went into administration, I kind of abandoned that whole speech team. So we missed the year of competition in COVID in 2020. In 2021, we were all still panicking, and so we did everything online, including speech competitions, which was a complete disaster. And then the next year, they went back face to face. But by this time, you have gone really 2 years with these kids and these programs never really speaking in front of live audiences. And then you factor in graduation rate, teams are just absolutely decimated. And so I looked at that after that first year back, and like, I can't leave a program like this, so I decided to come back this year and try to rebuild it, because coming out of that veil of COVID, holy crap, it is like starting over. And at that particular time before COVID, Jerome was at the top of the mountain in speech, and that. But coming out of it, it's like we're trying to teach all these brand new kids what tradition was like back in the before times, right? So that's why I'm back. That's why I'm Speech Boy. Competition is this Saturday.
I like it. The Men of Teal got it started. And on the subject of other colors, we are still in the winter blues, Scott. That's going to be the overarching theme of today's podcast, is the weather. And I hate talking about the weather. They say the number one rule in talk radio or a talk show or whatever is don't talk about the weather. People don't care about the weather enough. But it is really having an impact on the spring sports season to the point where some teams still haven't even gotten off the ground yet.
No, this has been the most bizarre third winter, or I don't know. We haven't even had first spring yet. I mean, Idaho's got 12 seasons, and normally by this time, if this kind of weather happens, it's the third winter because we've already had 2 springs. You know what I'm saying? So, but this has just been absolutely insane. The amount of snow and moisture and cold and wind has been miserable. And, most of the time in the spring, what happens is the teams from the East are buried and they come down to the Magic Valley to play, whether it's tennis, whether it's softball or, baseball, doesn't matter. I mean, they come here. Well, we can't even play. And that is brand new for us. So you've got Eastern Idaho is still buried. You've got the Wood River Valley, who is buried in snow, and we'll talk about that and show that in a minute. And then you've got the Magic Valley, which is really trying to maintain the moisture that keeps hitting their field. And then we've got like 40-mile-an-hour winds that it is just unbearable. So we can't do anything. In fact, one baseball team played their first game last night, I think it was. And so we've got Eastern Idaho and the Magic Valley just can't get anything going right now. And Boise Valley, yes, they're often playing. They're not in the conditions of the banana belt that they're used to, but at least they're playing. So when all of these things happen, rescheduling becomes a nightmare because you only have so many days, right? And just like basketball and football, you play your non-conference first to try to figure out your team and what you need to do. And then you jump into conference with some games under your belt. That is not happening because all of these non-conference games, because of the weather, are just getting canceled and we can't reschedule them. And even if we do reschedule them, we don't, when are we going to do it? And it's just a nightmare. And so a lot of these teams are just hitting the ground running, playing their conference games. I'm talking softball and baseball, really, tennis too, right into the conference, and how does that play out for state later on? I don't know. That might have something to do with how seasoned a team is going into a state tournament, because you're going to be playing about half of a season right now. And so this has been absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, we have a couple of teams over here in East Idaho that still haven't played a game yet, baseball and softball. I learned yesterday, we were recording the East Idaho Prepcast. Sean Kane is our co-host for that one. He is also the tennis coach at Century High School in Pocatello. Until yesterday, Scott, he had more matches than practices because he can't go out and practice.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And look at what this is doing to our athletes. And when we talk about not being able to play games, well, they're not being able to practice either. I mean, this isn't just something that, okay, we're not going to play a game. They can't even get on their fields, right? So you've got these softball teams, baseball teams trying to hit off of wiffle ball tees in the gym, or they're pitching in the gym, or they're doing something like that. Tennis has got a little makeshift net in the Ox gym, and they're just like bouncing back. It's like, really, what is that doing for you? And then you've got the track athletes that are running stair laps and running around the hallways in the schools and just trying to stay in shape, because they can't really get outside in a lot of places either. And Wood River, for example, they're buried in 3 feet of snow right now, and that's a conference opponent, and they haven't had one practice outside, not one. The first time any of their athletes got outside was when they came to our meet that we held March 16th, March 17th, right in that area. I can't remember the date, but even then, that was a cold, windy day, and that's the first time that crew got outside. Now, are you kind of increasing the likelihood for injuries because they're not quite conditioned through proper practice? I mean, there's a lot of things going on here when you talk about the weather.
Yeah, and so we're going to kind of talk about each individual sport as we go today, but the weather will be the overarching theme as we dive into some specific Magic Valley stories. I want to start with softball, where one of the teams that's been able to get in a couple of contests is Kimberly. Kimberly has Coach John Cook leading the way this year. The Bulldogs are off to a 5-0 start, Scott. They are 1-0 in conference play. Their league win came in a 6-0 shutout against Filer. And in that particular contest, Mallory Kelsey pitched one heck of a game in the circle for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, she did. I mean, it was a big no-no, and it was quite a performance from her. But, when you talk to Coach Cook and you talk to people that know her, they all say pretty much the same thing. She is about as tough physically and mentally as you get. And if there's anybody that's going to perform at that level, it's going to be her, because, she's not afraid of the grind. She's kind of welcomes it in a way, the challenge, the pressure. You see athletes buckle underneath that a lot. Not this kid. This is where she thrives. And the cool thing about what, Mallory's able to do and what people say about her is they say that she's a great teammate. Now, how does that translate over to pitching? Well, if you're a great teammate and you're pitching, you're in the circle, you're on the bump or whatever it is, your defense is going to play a little harder for you because they respect you, you are good to them, and they will go out of their way to make a play for you. And I pitched in college, and that's true. It's so true, because if you have the buy-in of the guys behind you or the girls behind you, man, the plays that they're going to make on your behalf are incredible. And that comes from being a really good teammate. And that's one thing that everybody said about Mallory. It was just, she was that much, so good to work with.
So she throws the no-hitter. In the process, she racks up 17 strikeouts.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, in a 7-inning game, Scott, 17 strikeouts, you're only working with 21 outs total. So,
yeah, I mean, talk about a dominating performance. But, it wasn't a big surprise to anybody, because she's the kid that, she's sacrifices personal time to get better. And, it's one of those things to where everybody wants to be great, but not everybody wants to do what it takes to be great. And there are some athletes that get it. And she's definitely one of them. And, and it's a fun team that she's on right now. Their energy is contagious. The coaches are just having a blast. They're blasting music all the time, anywhere from, Disney soundtracks to hip hop. And Coach Trapp and Coach Hutch, they love themselves some NSYNC, and so don't think they have fun with that, because they certainly do. Now, one thing about this Kimberly team too is before their first game, they took grounders on dirt for 30 minutes right before their very first game of the year. That was the first time they were on dirt. So, I mean, yeah, the struggle's real, but congratulations to a fantastic outing by Kelsey and her 17 strikeouts in the no-no.
Yep. And this was a league last year, Scott. You'll remember that everybody just beat up on each other. Everybody finished 5-4 in conference. It was something ridiculous. We're all 4 teams. We're all pretty good. Gooding's off to a 6-2 start. Filer is 3-4, including 0-2 in league. So they're behind the 8 ball just a little bit, but perennially they've been the strong program in this league. And then you got Buell, and Buell's one of these teams. It's like, can we get a break with the weather here? They're 2-0. That's it.
And isn't that something else? Because even in the Magic Valley, there are pockets of junk that are not popping up in other places too. I mean, and then on top of that is how is the field condition in some of these places too? Because, we have a brand new softball field here, and our coaching staff has just been amazing staying on top of it and keeping the moisture off and dragging it. But there's a lot of fields out there that don't have that, and they're buried, and they're not going to get out of it anytime soon.
So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on the softball developments as they continue here. But Gooding with 8 games so far is kind of the leader, and they got in that many games because they moved some games to Wendell, I believe. So you talked about these pockets where Gooding had bad weather. Wendell's field was okay. They called Wendell and said, "Hey, can we come over and play some baseball and softball?" Wendell said, "Sure." So you got to get creative with the scheduling for sure. Let's talk about spring golf, because it is something that's still going on. It's easy to forget because we had this split of golf now where 5A and 4A golf is in the fall, but your 3A and below is still in the spring. And so it's been interesting to see this experiment where in the fall, the weather was great to start the year, and we kept waiting and waiting. Okay, is the weather going to be bad when it's time for state? And the weather held up for the most part. State tournaments across the state were played in really good conditions. Obviously, in the spring, you kind of go in knowing that it's probably going to be pretty crappy to start, but you're banking on, in May, when it's time for state, you're going to have gorgeous weather to work with.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate for the 3As and below this year to have to deal with this. I mean, when I was coaching golf back in the day, it was miserable. I mean, it was absolutely miserable. We got maybe the last district and state were decent weather, but there was many times to where we're out there in 25 mile an hour winds, freezing conditions, but not to the point where there's still snow on the course and they can't get teams out there to play, and unfortunately 3As and below, they can't play in the fall. The participation numbers, it would kill their fall sports. They just can't carry that many sports in one season. The 5As and 4As, they're able to absorb it and handle it. And boy, what a huge change that was for 5 and 4A, because they had great weather every match, and they're coming in off of the summer. So you're getting those 5As and 4As at the peak of their game because they've been playing all summer, and now you bring it back to the spring, and these kids, they haven't played all winter, and they're out there in miserable conditions when they are able to play, and you're just not getting some very good golf, and certainly not very fun golf. And so what's happening right now is you've got some of these smaller schools that are trying to play golf. They're just, hitting wiffle balls off of mats in the gym. I think Gooding's got a golf simulator. So at least they're getting some of those swings in, which is nice. but their full schedule, they're not going to be competition, or they're going to be not as competition ready when district and state roll around.
I think everybody should take a field trip over to the Treasure Valley. Scott, I'm sure you saw this when you went over for state tournaments and stuff. Meridian, right outside Meridian, right off the interstate, they've got that brand new Topgolf facility. I think it's maybe a year old. So everybody take a field trip over there. Let's do it.
Yeah, no kidding. Wouldn't that be something? I mean, that's the closest to live golf that anybody would get is if they went to Topgolf, right? I mean, that tells you the state that we're in at the moment. Crazy.
Yeah. So we were able to get in a season opening golf meet. It was at the country club in Buell, Clear Lakes. Wendell performed pretty well, including boasting the top individual in Carly Lemoyne. She had the best score, male or female. So what a start for Carly Lemoyne and the Wendell golf program.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, that's a little feather in her cap that I'm sure that she will remind her male counterparts about. I would. It's like, yeah, remember that time I whooped you? Yeah, I do too.
Right.
So, yeah, great. What's the score, Brandon?
The Red Sox game or of the
Yeah,
they just went to break. It's still tied at 1 in the second, but I was looking up the info I had on my phone about this opening golf meet. That's why I keep looking down. I've got it on my phone.
Dodgers don't play till tonight, so
yeah, you're good. Yeah, and I flubbed up the name Tanley Lemoyne from Wendell. I did so there's Carson Lemoyne, who's a boys golfer for Wendell, and there's Tanley, and what I did is combine the two names in my head into Carly. So that was bad.
Game on. You got the game on.
Yeah.
So if that's the worst mistake you make, you're going to be just fine.
Right. So Wendell hosted this meet at Clear Lakes Country Club in Buell. Tanley Lemoyne shot a 39 overall, lowest on either side, and 8 teams came together for this season opening competition. And that leads me to the other point about spring golf, Scott. It's going to be like the same 8 teams kind of competing against each other all year, just because there's no 4A, no 5A teams to compete against. You're going to see a lot of the same teams week in, week out.
Yeah, and that's again unfortunate for these 3As and unders. And what the 5As and 4As, they dealt with the same thing, but the cool thing about golf is that you are able to play against 5As. I mean, if you've got a solid 1A golfer, the school size is not indicative of how good they are. They would go to these 5A tournaments. But now they don't get that opportunity. So they're seeing the same people over and over, which can get a little monotonous, but it is what it is. I mean, I think right now they'll play anybody if they can just get out and play.
Yep. So we'll keep an eye on golf as the spring season progresses and bring you some more golf coverage down the line. And then we wanted to stop off and check in on track and field and what's been going on there. Some teams have yet to compete this year. Some teams have been able to get a competition in, but man, it's kind of the same thing with the weather and track, especially because you need to be able to have clean surfaces to run on and pits to jump into. And so the weather just rearing its ugly head again.
Oh, it's horrible. I mean, you've got track teams that are dragging in their high jump mats so they can practice, but you can't really store them in the school in a lot of places because there's no room to do that. You're bringing in, you can't bring the blocks in, where are you going to put them? And I mean, vaulting, forget it. I mean, you're just not getting yourself ready for a successful track season. And like I said earlier, I mean, I'm curious as to what this does physically to the athletes, because I know the coaches are trying to replicate as much as they can indoors, trying to get lactic acid built up in the muscles and that kind of thing by doing all the stair laps, but you can only simulate so much inside. It's just not the same. And then, you take these athletes and you put them out there and it's freezing cold, which obviously ups the chance of injury as well. So you just have to be really, really careful in this little balancing act, with things. So Talking to people up north in, Wood River and Cary, Wood River's not going to get outside at all until the end of April. I mean, at the earliest. Think about that up there when they are completely buried in snow. Are they going to have any home matches or games or anything this year? I mean, that's a legitimate question because it's snowing right now. And, and that takes a toll on a program. Not to mention the financial aspect of it too, because athletic programs and athletic departments, their number one source of revenue is gate, from games. And if you don't have anything bringing in revenue, then you're sending all of these teams away, and it's costing money to do it. So it's interesting how the dominoes start to fall when the weather starts to dictate. There's a lot to it.
Yep. To give you an idea of what the Sun Valley is experiencing, Scott, you got a photo from Lee J. Cook, the athletic director at Cary High School. And he sent a picture of what the track looks like here. I'm going to change the screen just for a second here. And then I'm going to put this picture up on the screen for those that are watching on the video. And Scott, for those that are listening audio only, kind of narrate, what we see here in this picture.
Well, this is the track at Cary High School with a tunnel for survival dug right there. You cannot get to the track. There is probably, would you say that's 3 feet of snow?
Yeah.
And so there's a pathway shoveled out to get to the track, and that track just got cleared. I mean, they finally were able to use their Bobcat snowblower to remove snow on the track just last week, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So when you look at this, and we're supposed to be a month into a 2.5 month schedule in spring sports, you're telling me that's going to disappear in 2 months? It's not. And that is what is happening in Cary and in Wood River. And that's why I'm like, they may not even have a home anything this year. It's insane.
Yeah, teams are getting creative, Scott. I will say for track and field here in eastern Idaho, where I live, Century was supposed to host a quad meet with Rigby, Shelley, and Blackfoot, but that's not going to happen here. We just got 3 inches of snow last night, Scott. So Century proactively calls up Canyon Ridge and says, hey, you're not using your facility on Friday. Do you mind if we all come over and compete so we can at least do something? And Canyon Ridge was like, yeah, go ahead, let's do it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, you do have to get really super creative, because all those schools you just mentioned were supposed to come down to Jerome for the initial kickoff track meet that we always have. Well, that didn't happen, obviously. And so, yeah, they're scrambling. We're scrambling. And the creativity and the cooperation that all these schools now have to have with one another is insane, because, we've got schools from the east that are traveling as far west now as Boise, and they want to stop and at least get on some dirt. So we have some that are stopping here at Jerome to get on our field as we finally have that thing running now. But it's I don't know what the state of it is now, because it was snowing sideways when I came on the air moments ago, and the moisture we just can't take anymore. So yeah, I mean, when we are able to have teams, yeah, they're stopping here trying to find some dirt, and it's just been bananas. But it's been interesting, because all of us ADs and coaches now, we are just talking constantly, and having conversations that we've never had to have before. Can we play on your surface? Is your surface okay? Can we stop and practice? All of that kind of stuff. And it is, like you said, very creative right now.
Definitely. One last track and field note, and then we'll wrap up the show here. And by the way, Marlo Herford wrote a great statewide track and field preview for the entire state of Idaho. It's on the homepage, IdahoSports.com. I wrote a statewide baseball and a statewide softball preview, kind of breaking down every league, every classification. That's right on the homepage. at IdahoSports.com as well to kind of get you into spring sports mode. The big storyline in track and field in the Magic Valley to me this year, Scott, is Gatlin Bear, because he is a singular talent on the football field, but also on the track, to the point where Kimberly has been very competitive in 3A track the last couple of years, pushing Sugar Salem. But now that Bear has transferred to Burley, Kimberly in one fell swoop has kind of gotten the wind taken out of their sails. And conversely, now Burley, just by having Bear transfer in, Burley all of a sudden is in the mix to come home with a trophy from state.
Well, and that's the thing about track is you get a guy like Gatlin Bear who's going to score points in multiple events. No matter what he does, he's going to score for you. If you have one or two kids like that, sometimes that's all you need, And so the addition of him is, it just put Burley in the conversation for a trophy. It put them in the running for a district title and perhaps a state trophy. But, the one track meet that we did have here at Jerome that I was telling you about, Burley was here, and I got to see Gatlin run. And, it is something to watch. It truly, truly is. He is, you can't really describe how fast this kid is. And he ran the 100, and I don't even, you couldn't even put in the frame Gatlin and the rest of the field. That's how, it wasn't even close, And the thing about Burley is they've got a couple of other kids that can run too, They've got a pretty solid distance crew. So they were okay without Gatlin, but with him now, keep your eye on Burley.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch as the season goes along. And of course, Gatlin Bear picking up more and more football, offers with each passing day. Scott, I believe 3 of the 4 teams that were in the college football playoff this past year, the 4 teams that compete for the championship, 3 of the 4 have offered Gatlin Bear. Scott, can you tell me which school from that Final 4 has not?
Okay. Wow.
As a reminder, I'll tell you who was in. You had Georgia, of course. You had TCU, which played for the national championship. You had Ohio State. And who was the 4th team? Alabama, I think?
No, Michigan.
Oh, yeah, Michigan. That's right.
So out of all of those, I would say the one that has not, I'm going to guess Ohio State.
Correct. Maybe I joked about this on another podcast. Maybe Ohio State is still salty from losing out on Colston Loveland. Of course, he went to Michigan, and we're done with those Idaho Magic Valley kids.
Yeah, well, and you think about it too. It's like, okay, TCU relatively close, so that might be something that gets on the radar. We already know that Michigan has got a connection there, and so that makes sense. We know that the SEC actually came after Loveland as well, so Georgia makes sense. Ohio State is the only one that really was kind of like, what's their tie here? And there you go.
Yeah, and I know there's been other school, Arkansas has reached out. Of course, Gatlin's brother, Jackson Bear, is a member of the Arkansas track team. And that's the thing with Gatlin is wherever he goes, he could do both. He could do track and football. That's pretty common where they'll split up the scholarship. Half your scholarship comes from football, half of it comes from track. There's creative ways you can work with that. And so it's going to be fascinating to see the recruiting process unfold for Gatlin Bear as well.
Yeah, no question about it. And it's a fun process too, knowing that you're going to have options, and the courting and the recruiting, all of that stuff is such a fun process for an athlete and their family, because it's just an experience that not many ever get to have, and especially around here. You don't hear about it a lot. So it is a big deal. So when Colston went through all that, everybody was just kind of living vicariously through that experience, through him and what Cameron Anderson was doing for him and all that kind of stuff. Everybody was just on the edge of their seat, just waiting for the next episode, And so, yeah, it's a bigger deal, I think, here. than it would be in some bigger city. And that's why it's so much fun.
Yep. We'll continue to monitor that and all of the other spring sports storylines. If you are a coach or a fan or a player or a parent out there, and there's a story you want us to talk about here on the Magic Valley Prepcast, feel free to reach out. Brandon at IdahoSports.com is the email address, and send us what you want us to talk about. And there's a good chance we'll talk about it. So,
that's right. We're still working on that strange superstition stuff that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. So that will come eventually. So just kind of put that on your radar if you're listening. We are going to be looking for the strangest and weirdest superstitions that your team does, because we found a couple at state basketball that kind of got us thinking about this topic. So be thinking about it if you're out there listening, because we're going to be reaching out to you.
Yes, I can't wait for our superstition podcast to come as well. But it's good to be back at it. We're not going to take any more weeks off. It'll be pretty steady here throughout the spring sports season, now that we've kind of rested up from spring break. So thanks for tuning into the Magic Valley Prepcast, everybody. For Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Baney, and we'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.